Assassin's Creed Origin has added in a cheat console, or more specifically a cheat panel, that has a bunch of sliders that allow you to customize your gameplay experience. You can do things like increase running speed or decrease it. You can increase enemy health or you can decrease it, etc., etc. And it's kind of interesting because open world games really haven't had cheats for quite a while. So this is actually kind of cool, and I kind of wish I had the game. Michael here with another topic video. So if you've never played Assassin's Creed Origins, I've heard mixed reviews on it. However, I have heard that it is a decent sandbox game. They kind of have some arbitrary RPG elements in there, but it still ends up being a good sandbox game. And what ends up making it a great sandbox game is the fact that it's just a large, beautiful world. It's a little bit buggy, but who really cares? It's all about going around and exploring. And we've been getting a lot of these open world games, but not very many of them have really been sandboxes per se. And this actually makes a really interesting kind of comeback for these types of games, because a cheat panel is something interesting. So the way it works is when you're in game, this is only for the PC version of the game. Whoops, I forgot to double jump. When you're in the PC version of the game, by the way, it doesn't work for the console version, but you're able to actually open up this panel, and the panel will actually show a bunch of sliders and options, and these different sliders and options will modify the game's values. And so let's say you wanted to make it so that you could run extra fast, there's an option for that. Let's make it so that you could increase or decrease enemy vision. So let's say it's like you just want to walk around and not be seen by guards, there's an option for it. And so you just end up turning down their vision range, and you make it so, hey, you can end up doing whatever you want. And you can do this with a lot of things inside the game. Now, I obviously don't have the game, and so I can't actually go through and like look at them and stuff, and I kind of wish I did have it, because this actually sounds really fun, because it's a nice way to kind of customize your experience, and it makes it so it can actually be a sandbox for once. A lot of these open world games, they've just had it so that you just kind of have the setup that they give you, and then that's the experience, and that's not necessarily as fun as, let's say, a true sandbox. Because what happens once you're done with the main story? What happens once you end up being done with the gameplay experience? Let's say you're kind of bored with what it's got, or maybe you want an additional challenge. This is actually my favorite part about a lot of cheats or secret modes per se. I'll talk about those in a second. Is the fact that you can end up adding in additional challenge. However, all these types of games really haven't had that for a really long time. And so seeing them adding this into Assassin's Creed Origins is actually really, really interesting, because now it's not only just, you know, like, oh, I want to make it so that I'm invincible or whatever. I want to turn on God mode, which has been a cheat that we've been lacking in a lot of these games, mostly thanks to microtransactions. We'll talk about that in a second. But like, they're just like, oh, hey, we're going to make it so that you can kind of change up the difficulty as well. And so let's say you want to make it so it's incredibly difficult. Let's say you want to make it, let's say you're going through a low level area, for example, and it's like, oh, well, I just one-shot all these enemies. Oh, you know what? Just open up this cheat panel, boost up their health to, you know, 500% or whatever the heck you want. And then boom, all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is a little bit more of a challenge. Or maybe they have AI modifiers or something along those lines that they can end up adding in later, because that would actually be really interesting as well. I don't know if in that game, I doubt they do. But in some games, they actually make it so the AI is stronger in, you know, later parts of the game, I guess you could say, like enemy types and stuff like that. That would be interesting to see them add in that sort of thing. I didn't hear anybody say anything specifically about that. It's mostly stuff like stat modifiers and stuff. But like, this is just a really cool idea, because this isn't only just being added to the game, it's actually free as well. This is just a free update to the PC version of the game. So if you already have the game, boom, you have this enabled, and it allows you to do a bunch of different stuff with the game as well. And so there's also presets. So let's say you're not really that, you know, creative with all these types of things, or maybe you're not the type of person to go out of your way to kind of add in additional difficulty. I know there are people out there, plenty of people out there, that don't necessarily go in and add their own difficulty. Let's say there's an option for hard mode. They say, nah, I'm just going to play on normal, and that's how they experience their game. Well, there's actually a bunch of presets. So like, let's say you just want to end up doing something like, let's say you want to challenge yourself for once or whatever, and you're like, oh, hey, I want to try this to be super stealthy. I want to make it so that, you know, no matter what, they're going to see me if I end up moving or making any sound or anything along those lines. Or maybe I make it so that the enemies are possibly difficult, so that, you know, they just end up, maybe, you know, if you end up getting seen, you're going to end up dying. This is a sort of situation to where it's like, oh, hey, I can end up, what do I need for this? Swap hat. Well, yeah, I know that, but like, oh, I need this. So you can end up making it so it's like, oh, hey, it's super difficult. And they actually have presets for this. And so, for example, they have one to where, when I was reading an article about it, they were talking about one to where it was like, oh, it's going to make it so that they're super, you know, aware. They end up making it so they can end up seeing you really, really easily. And so it's like, oh, hey, if I make any sort of sound whatsoever, or I make any sort of wrong movements, or they see me just like slightly walk out of a brush, it ends up being a little bit more realistic, as in, if I saw a guy walking out of a brush, I would see a guy walking out of a brush quite right away. And it'd be like, hey, if I'm on guard, I'm probably going to end up noticing that. Oh, I was supposed to hold it. Whoops. I would probably end up noticing that and being like, maybe this guy shouldn't be in my bush, which probably sounds wrong in multiple ways. And so it kind of, adds in additional challenge. You can make it so that you can customize your game experience, again, making it into a sandbox game. And it's a free edition as well. And so one of the reasons why I was going to talk about this a little bit later is that, we end up seeing cheats kind of go away because publishers realize they can end up selling a lot of this type of stuff with, microtransactions. So stuff like, oh, we want to make the game easier. And so it's like, oh, we'll buy our microtransactions. It's totally an option, guys, which it isn't. They want you to buy them because they're jerks. But it's not necessarily a choice when it goes into that sort of thing, because it's like, oh, hey, we want you to buy these because we designed them specifically to make money. And so when you end up going through it, it's like, oh, hey, well, if you're not buying these, you're not making us money. So why would we end up making the game easier for you? But these guys are just like, nah, you know what? This is a fun feature. We want people to keep playing our game. We have DLC and stuff like that planned for the future, I believe. I believe they have coming DLC. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not necessarily following it 100%. But they could end up having like future DLC options or something along those lines, to where they're like, oh, hey, we want people to keep playing our game. What's one way to do that? Make it so it's a sandbox experience. People play GTA nonstop all day, every day, because that game is an ultimate sandbox. And while I'm not a fan of the thing they did to multiplayer, and I kind of got bored of GTA years ago, it's still one of those games that people go back to, and they're like, oh, hey, I want to go back and just have a sandbox experience. That's what they end up doing. And there's plenty of games that end up doing that as well with, like, let's say MMOs, for example. MMOs are a great example to where I'll just end up going into a sandbox MMO just to run around and do stuff willy-nilly. Am I supposed to blow this up? Is that what I'm supposed to be doing with it? I think it is, and I'm just an idiot. Nope, there we go. Yep, I was supposed to blow it up. I haven't played this game in a while. I never finished my review for it. So yeah, it's just really interesting, and I hope that other devs can end up looking at this, and other publishers most specifically. There are devs that have added this into the feed in the past, but they have always been indie games. There's a bunch of indie games, for example, they'll add in little cheat modes or optional modes, etc., or they'll end up keep updating their game after the game is out and just adding in additional content to keep people interested in the game. And it just makes it such a higher quality content, or a higher quality product in general. And this is something that's, I would like to see this in other games, just because it would make it into a true sandbox experience. If we had all these open world games and it truly became a sandbox to where we can just go around and screw around. Now, everyone has to. Obviously, they have a main story, etc., and so you can end up just going through that if that's all you're looking for. But it's still one of those cases to where it's just really, really interesting to see added in and adding into this true sandbox area. So if you end up being bored of the game, maybe the combat loop... Oh, hey, I cleared something. Maybe the combat loop or something along those lines doesn't necessarily interest you, but the stealth combat does, or vice versa. You can end up just making it so your experience is that. That said, though, this isn't necessarily adding in new content to say. I mean, they do have DLC plans, I'm sure, because every single game has DLC plans. And so I'm sure they're going into it and being like, yeah, well, this is going to sell tons of DLC in the future, right, guys? And so, it's definitely not fruitless. They are going to end up, having it for that. But it also makes it so it kind of immortalizes the game a little bit. It's always interesting to see these types of modes, because sandbox games can easily be gone back to. I know people that have even gone back to the original GTAs every once in a while, just because they're experiences that aren't really limited in a way. It's limited by your own creativity and what you want to end up doing. And so you can end up going back to these games years and years down the line. And maybe that's what they're trying to do with this. Maybe not. I mean, they could just end up doing this. Like, some devs is like, I want to do this. And the company's like, screw it. We don't care. We sold our microtransactions. We're good. We don't really care. And so they can end up just adding it in because of that. But if other people end up seeing this, or other devs, other publishers end up seeing this, and it ends up becoming a widespread thing, I would love to see cheats come back, because cheats, I'll end up doing a design view video on why cheats kind of disappeared in the future. I'm actually working on the scripting for it now. But like, this is actually an interesting time for that as well, because I noticed this news the day after I was deciding to do that video. But yeah, it's like one of those situations to where I would love to see them come back, because they didn't necessarily just disappear because of microtransactions. Certain things did, but for the most part, it ended up just becoming the technical details. So the fact that they're actually putting in some extra work to add in these sort of funds, or extra fun little things to add into the game, is actually really, really interesting. So huge props to them. I'm really happy they ended up doing that, because it's just really, really interesting. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this one. And of course, you can leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you end up having this cheat thing? Because I would actually like to hear from people what's in it. It just came out, and so I haven't really been able to find things that have been saying like, oh, this is what's available. I'm sure there's one on the forums somewhere or something along those lines, and I just didn't see it. But I've been checking articles and stuff like that this morning. It's pretty early, and so yeah, that's just the thing that I've been doing. So I don't necessarily know too much about it. So go ahead and leave down in the comments below whatever's in it if you end up having the game. It'd be really interesting to hear that. It is only available on the PC version of the game, however, so if you have the console version, it ain't gonna work. Game in the background has been A Hat in Time. I knew there was this platforming area, and so I'm like, that's Assassin's Creed-ish, sort of, not really. Yeah, I don't have Assassin's Creed installed, any Assassin's Creed installed, so yeah, I just kind of ended up playing a game that has platforming in it that's 3D, and this one works, and it's cute as heck, so deal with it. And yeah, anyways, you can also check out our gaming Discord called The Broken Chatbox, link in the description. We end up having gaming stuffs, and we talk about gaming stuffs, and etc, etc. We also play some online games, so if you want to end up joining us for that, you can end up jumping in, go ahead and say hello in chat, and we will say hello back. We're always working and stuff like that, so it's not necessarily the most active place, but it's still there. And of course, if you're interested in my other styles of content, you can check out my website at michaelpstanich.com, link in the description as well. Anyways, like I said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm gonna have a good heckin' time, because I think I'm actually gonna finish this game. Maybe not today. I'm busy today, but like, it'll happen. It'll happen. I'll also make jumps, effectively. At some point, it'll happen.